This module is on heroes and the heroic quest. Now, I have said in past modules that the flood and the descent into the underworld and the dying and resurrected God are some of the most prevalent type of myth throughout the world. And the heroic quest is right up there with them. And not only that, it incorporates, in many cases, aspects of the flood and of the dying and resurrected deity and or the descent into the underworld. Now, we have looked at the Epic of Gilgamesh in other modules, and yep, we're going to go back to him in this module. And I am sorry if you're getting tired of hearing about poor old Gil, but his tale is the oldest piece of literature in the world. I should say extant piece, because perhaps other pieces of literature were written before Gilgamesh or concurrent with Gilgamesh, but we don't have any of them. And of course, I have expressed my opinion in this class that oral tradition stories are literature. And I'm pretty sure that the Epic of Gilgamesh was passed down orally before it was written. But as far as written literature, this is the oldest piece of literature that we have. And Gilgamesh, I cover a lot of this in the PowerPoint in the module about Gilgamesh. So I want to hit some of the most important aspects in this video. But for details, refer to that. Now, Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was most likely a real historical person. He's thought to have been king of Uruk, which is modern-day Iraq, probably circa 2700 to 2600 BCE. His story was first written down, put the dates down, between 2600 and 2500 BCE. And there are several versions of Gilgamesh over a period of time. Of course, the oldest one is in Sumeria, and then we go into Babylon. And the most well-known version was from the Library of Nineveh, and that's about in the 600 BCE range, but it's much, much older than that. But unfortunately, much of it has been lost in those older versions. Now, going back to Gilgamesh as a real person, Sumeria and Babylon kept a record of kings, and Gilgamesh is mentioned in this lineage of kings. Now, because he is mentioned in this line of kings, does that mean that all of the fantastical circumstances of his life are true? No, it doesn't. Robert Graves says in The Greek Myths, and I have the book here someplace, but I'm not going to look it up at this moment, that all myth has a basis in, I should say myths about people, have a basis, a real basis, real historical basis. So you have Heracles, who was probably not one man, but there was a very strong man named Heracles, and then men who came after him were dubbed Heracles as well. And so over a period of time, the tales grew in the telling, and the attributes of many strong men were put upon Heracles/Hercules. That might be the same of Gilgamesh. So did Gilgamesh, did he experience all those things? No. He might have went on a quest for immortality, but not going through all of the things that we see in his tale. I like to compare this to Heinrich Schliemann's finding of Troy. Not founding, he didn't establish the city. Finding of Troy in the late 19th century. Just because Schliemann proved that Troy existed did not mean that the Iliad took place. There were certainly wars there, yes. But was there a big horse? No evidence. Was there Achilles? Probably, but we have no true evidence. And so the fact that Gilgamesh existed does not mean that the fantastical elements of his tale are true. Now, Gilgamesh was most likely the heir of other tales that went before him that started establishing the elements of heroic tales before Gilgamesh was even born. And these are the things that I want to cover in this video so that you understand the bases that Gilgamesh set for later heroic epics. And number one is he's part deity. Gilgamesh, his father was said to be a king and his mother a goddess. And of course, you're going to get variant myths on this. It's also said that some of the other gods bestowed gifts upon him, and he was 2/3 human and 1/3 god, which doesn't quite work out as far as parents go. But at any rate, he had, I won't say immortal blood, because in Sumerian Babylon we know that deities can die, but he had the blood of deity within him. So that is one aspect of many heroes that we say come after, including Perseus and Theseus. Greek heroes are often have a god as a father. And even going on into Christianity, Jesus fits the many of the aspects of the hero. And of course, Jesus was in Christian tales was the son of Yahweh. Joseph was his surrogate father, which goes to the next one, that the hero often grows up away from his father, at least. Gilgamesh does. And then again, we see this in Greek myth with both Theseus and Perseus. We see it with Jesus, and we see it with a much later, not a deity, but certainly hero, and that is Arthur, who is raised by Sir Kay and or Merlin, and does not know his father, Uther Pendragon. So that is a base that Gilgamesh sets for later heroes. Gilgamesh had a sidekick, and of course by now we're all familiar with Enkidu, who was created to fight Gilgamesh, which because of his hubris, which leads to another heroic trait, which is a tragic flaw, and it quite often is hubris. But before I discuss the hubris, I want to go back to Enkidu and talk about the sidekick throughout history. The Greek gods, the Greek heroes most often had a sidekick, and some of them they are not so apparent. They got lost over the years and we're not as familiar with them. But you also see in Greek myth many brothers and many twins. And of course, in Mesoamerican myth, we see the divine twins, who also echo this idea of the sidekick. This is abundant in modern myths. Batman has Robin. The Green Lantern has Kato. Darth Vader originally, he kind of goes it alone. But Luke certainly has Yoda, and Han Solo has Chewbacca. So the sidekick is a very important part of this heroic aspects. And then back to the hubris. This being the first piece of literature is the first place we see hubris. And hubris is, of course, overweening pride. Maybe okay to have a little bit of pride, but not pride to the point where it blinds you. This tragic flaw we see in Oedipus. We see in Arthur, who doesn't understand what's going on in his kingdom, and because he doesn't understand, things go on that shouldn't go on, including the adultery between his wife Guinevere and his best friend Lancelot. Now, the Arthurian myth, both Lancelot in particular, is a much later addition to that legend or that myth. But in the most well-known versions of it, we do see Lancelot and Guinevere. Jason is hubristic. Hubris abounds in Greek myth. And Gilgamesh was also guilty of this. Now, he and Enkidu was created to challenge Gilgamesh, and they were so well matched that one could not beat the other, and so they become friends. This is kind of a strange concept to me, but I've heard, and I don't want to be sexist and label this as a male concept, but I do have male friends who have said, well, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm going to leave it at that. So the sidekick, the tragic flaw, the hubris. Gilgamesh's tragic flaw was also his humanity. He is mortal. Now, of course, the gods are mortal in that sense too, but they are much less likely to die than is Gilgamesh. And so sometimes the tragic flaw is something that is beyond what the hero himself can even work with. And so he is human. He's going to die. He realizes his mortality, and he goes on a quest. And of course, that quest is what makes the hero. It is what the hero does in his questing that actually makes him a hero. And so Gilgamesh goes on the search for immortality. And again, we've already covered this. And meets Utnapishtim and finds out that he's going to die. Utnapishtim has been the only mortal upon whom immortality has been bestowed. And while Gilgamesh might be part deity, might be the king of Uruk, it's sealed. And so this also introduces one other aspect of the heroic quest, and that is fate. Now, the Greeks were huge on fate. Paris, Priam, the king of Troy, tries to circumvent fate by sending Paris away from Troy when he is born, because it is foretold that Paris will cause the downfall of Troy. Oedipus's parents, Laos and Jocasta, send him away because it is foretold that he will kill his father and marry his mother. And by sending him away, they cause this to happen. When Oedipus returns to Corinth and goes on a quest to find out why the country is being blighted for a sin that has been committed, it's his hubris that makes him continue on even after Tiresias, the prophet, and his wife/mother, Jocasta, says, hey, forget about this. It is his hubris that continues on, and it is his fate. He cannot escape it. The same for Arthur. Arthur cannot escape his fate. Jesus cannot escape his fate. Now, Jesus does not have hubris. That is one thing that he doesn't suffer from. But the other heroes that we see big time, Anakin Skywalker tries to outwit fate in order to save Padme. Doesn't work. Does not work. And so these are some of the aspects of the heroic quest that are cemented with Gilgamesh 2500 BCE, and they still continue. Heroes today, whether they are in Westerns, whether they are in science fiction, or whether in just fiction, tend to have all or some of these traits that we see in myth. Now, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to talk about some of these other heroes in other videos, but don't ever underestimate the power of Gilgamesh. He influenced history later, and he also gained his immortality. Not in the way he wanted, but we still speak of him today.